Welcome to the How HR Leaders Change the World podcast. I'm your host, Cecilia Crossley, and each week we explore how the work of HR leaders is also creating positive social change, contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, goals which the world's companies are increasingly understanding the urgency of achieving and investing in the action required. If you'd like clear, actionable ideas for how you can use the power of your role to affect change in your company, you're in the right place. Following a corporate upbringing, I founded the social enterprise From Babies with Love. We provide services to HR leaders, and through this work, I realised that HR professionals and social entrepreneurs are working in the same areas, albeit in different ways. So we created this podcast to share knowledge on steps we can take through the work of HR. In my opinion, if you're an HR professional, you are also a change maker. And this podcast will provide you with examples of how. By sharing the successes of some of the world's most inspiring HR leaders, you can frame your work in the context of positive change, implement brilliant ideas, and feel absolutely wonderful about doing so. A huge welcome to Stefan Ries, who is an external senior advisor at McKinsey Co, and until recently was the global CHRO at SAP. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm particularly excited to welcome you to the podcast, having heard you talk a little about the concept of HRPunks. I've heard you use phrases such as HR innovating and disrupting and not conforming and challenging the status quo. And you can imagine on a podcast called How HR Leaders Change the World, this is right up our street. And so without further ado, let's get into the 5 questions that we ask our HR leaders. And our first is, as an HR leader whose influence creates social change, what do you feel has been your most impactful action to date?
Well, first of all, and this is probably very close combined to this movement called HRPunks, where I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to found it and really see so many people excited behind that concept. When I look to your first question, what kind of influence we have created social change, where we have seen the biggest impact, I have to tell you that in my professional life within HR over the last 30 years, the best I've seen is how we unleash talents all around the world. It's simply amazing. When I look from talents from Asia to South America, this is such an opportunity to welcome people to a company, to a project, to a family, where you have the chance to integrate them and also benefit from their different points of view, from the different cultural backgrounds, from their different educational backgrounds. And this makes a team, from my perspective, even stronger. So to cut the long story short, I'm always looking for 1 + 1 = 3. And as an HR leader, I'm super proud of, for example, what we have achieved at SAP, that we could really welcome talents from all around the world, which make us even stronger. And when you look at this, that creates such a positive impact, not only to the company, but also into society. When I look into organizations who welcome talents from all around the world, where people with this kind of different background work together, in my mind, this is a great opportunity to open not only an opportunity to work in a team with a diverse background. For me, this is really something which gives all of us access to the best talents all around the world.
Yeah. And when you were creating HRPunks, what were 1 or 2 of the first things that you did to get it going and to galvanize your HR teams all around the world? How did you turn the concept that you'd envisioned into, the day-to-day activities and embedding it into the culture and day-to-day processes of your HR functions at SAP?
Yeah, I mean, when you start to think about a movement and how you can implement this, then of course actions need to follow. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bold, nice marketing statement, but that doesn't change the world, nor will it excite people to be part of this movement. So, what did we do? I think number one, and this was very important, Cecilia, to create was this willingness of change. HRPunks stands for we do not conform, we question the status quo. Because I have heard so many times in my almost 30 years working in HR as our profession that this question of does HR has a seat at the table? And I'm a very positive, I'm a very ambitious person. And when I hear that question, my blood pressure goes up because I'm telling the people who ask me that question, I'm basically saying, yes, our topics are so relevant. Think about talent development, think about leadership development, think about inclusion, think about all aspects of our HR work every single day. You don't need a seat at the table, stand at the table because the topics are so relevant. And when you create this kind of understanding, then of course actions need to follow. So a good example I can give to you is when you think about HRPunks and be disruptive, be more bold, is the first thing what we need to learn is talk business language. And business language is facts, numbers, figures. We all know that. Especially if we compare HR to our lovely partner community called controllers. They are numbers savvy. Unfortunately, HR people are not so much number savvy. So when we introduced this topic, this movement of HRPunk, we in parallel educated our petitioner, our colleagues in the HR community, really to talk business language. And that's facts, numbers, and figures. So one example I can give to you is we hired data analysts. Nobody had data analysts in an HR organization before, but they helped us like an ambassador to create an environment where people were passionate now, all of a sudden, also in HR about facts, numbers, and figures. And that's just a very small example in order to make a movement go live with substance behind it, because the marketing logo is nice, but with that, you're not just going to create the change.
Yeah, that's a really helpful example. Thank you. And thinking more broadly for our next question, you have held many roles and worked for many years in the tech industry and now advise some tech startups too. What do you think is the most exciting opportunity for HR to change the world?
When I look to that question, basically two answers come in my mind. Number one, unfortunately, we are facing this global crisis, this global horrible pandemic crisis. And people are dying. We need to fight the virus. And this unfortunately is going to stay for a little bit longer until we find the right solutions in each and every country all around the world. Now, when you look at that threat, I'm a person who always looks into a glass of water, which is not always half empty. It's half full. And this is the opportunity for HR. Think about the following. Over the last 12 to 13 months, team members are working from at home. They haven't seen the office space for a long, long time. And in my industry, which I have been working for so many years in IT, I know how hard it is if you don't have an opportunity to talk to your colleagues face to face. So everybody, while we face the excitement at the beginning that you can work from at home, now you can see that a lot of people are really depressed that they can't work together as a collaborative team face to face. And this is a moment. This is a moment for us in HR. Because I'm a big believer, what we're going to see in the future is not what we have seen before we have entered the crisis. We will see much more flexible work arrangements. If you take manufacturing, for example, out for a minute. But when you look into my industry in IT, basically people can work from everywhere. There is no need to be in the office every single day. So this kind of hybrid environment comes to my mind, which is a huge opportunity for HR, because we can build solutions, our programs, our approach to people around this hybrid approach. And this offers us something which has been accelerated, which is called technology. And I know not all of us are super technology savvy, but we know for sure that in 2, 3, or 4 years, the majority of our workforce are going to be millennials. And they are the natural born mobile phone users. We are, or my generation, as baby boomers, we are probably best seen as digital immigrants, but they are digital native. And they want to see solutions, technical solutions available also from the HR function as an enabler organization to them as so-called end consumers and end customers. And that's a huge opportunity. I've worked with now a few startup organizations who look into, for example, tools of team effectiveness. I mean, 12 months ago, everybody would have looked at me and said, are you serious? Are we looking now into an app to help us to be a better team and to look into team effectiveness and measure that over time versus on-site, face-to-face team effectiveness measures? Now it's much easier because we're living in this hybrid world. We don't know if everybody's going to return to the office. And this one particular example just gives you, hopefully, an imagination what we can dream about and be bold. And coming back to the theme of HRPunks, disrupt our own industry, disrupt our own ways how we think and act within our profession called human resources.
It does fuel my imagination, and in an exciting way, because I think that the challenges that we face are global, and therefore it makes sense to have global teams to create solutions to the challenges. And, an app could help effective working across a global team. I'm picturing it in my mind. Yeah. So that's a wonderful example, an insight into what could come. And I'm sure, knowing the tech industry, come quite quickly for our ways of working.
Yeah, and Cecilia, given that, when you just look into this particular example, I'm so passionate about how can we improve our effectiveness in teams or even in organizations. Now, if you get a tool on your mobile phone, which helps you to understand where we are as a team right now, and then you measure progress over the next couple of weeks, this is just sensative, because you don't need anybody educated from HR to help you to do that, maybe at the beginning. But over time, the teams can sustain the situation by themselves. They can check, look, and balance. They can look into measures how to improve team effectiveness. And I'm a big believer, this is exactly what we want to see in HR. We want to be seen as business enablers, and not what I've unfortunately witnessed many times as a so-called Red Cross part of the organization. HR people love to help, but we are not the Red Cross of an organization. And that mindset needs to change. And this is something where I see this as an opportunity. Technology, data savviness, be bold, be open, question what you have done in the past, which might be very, very helpful also for our end customers. And we don't have so many end customers. We have applicants, we have employees, we have managers, we have leaders, and we have alumni members. That's it. And I think this is exactly what you need to focus on in our profession.
How HR Leaders Change the World is brought to you by From Babies with Love, and this episode is sponsored by our very own parental leave gift service. We help solve the challenge of connecting with colleagues across parental leave and in returning to work, contributing to talent retention and so too gender balanced strategy. From Babies with Love donates 100% of its profits to orphaned and abandoned children. Your beautiful, sustainably sourced From Babies with Love gifts come with the story of how your company is also helping a less fortunate child, creating meaningful engagement. We transform spend that so often already takes place on flowers or products that don't have the Sustainable Development Goals at their heart. We transform that spend to become a consistent, inclusive and strategic part of your working parents programme. Ask us to tell you more at frombabieswithlove.org. Make an impact at a defining moment. It's wonderful to hear you describe your passion for that work, which leads us very nicely into question 3, which is how your work in this area of team effectiveness, how it's creating a chance for you to also create change in a particular area of social or environmental injustice that you're also passionate about. Do you have any interesting examples of how you've been able to link your work in HR to driving change for something you're personally passionate about?
Yes, I do. I'm, as I've told you, I'm a very passionate person in terms of my engagement towards being part of a winning team. I always want to win. I'm a very ambitious person, but at the same time, I'm also a biased person. So when I have my biological bias, when I have my bias out through my education, throughout my experience, it's not always helpful. And we know that. We know that from not only from my personal experience, but we have seen so many studies all around the world that, for example, if you have a biased decision in a recruiting process, you tend to hire the same person. You tend to hire the same personality, unfortunately. And you have a bias even where when you look into where people are coming from, which kind of cultural background they have, name, religion, sexual orientation. We have a bias. And when I now bring it back to what I've told you, this example of team effectiveness, think about the following. You're gonna use an application which help you to understand each other better in an existing team. And you can improve that. That was our first part of the example. Now think about it even further. And you look into this recruiting process. You're using team effectiveness. You probably can use this tool also to say, who or which kind of personality is missing for us in a really high effective and high efficient team. And this solution gives you maybe the one or the other better data, facts, and information to make a better educated decision around your hiring process. Then, once you have this kind of data available, this data will influence also heavily your bias. And you will think 2 or 3 times before you're going to make a biased decision versus an educated decision where you have facts sitting on your table. At least that was my experience as a leader and as a manager. The more facts, the more educated I am before making a decision, the better it is. Now, of course, I also want to have still my emotional engagement displayed. But in situations like in a hiring process, when I look into a team setup, when I look into I want to win with this team, this will set my bias apart. I will look much more into facts and figures. And with that gives us an unbelievable opportunity, for example, also to offer people coming from underprivileged families or born and raised with a social disadvantage. All of a sudden, you have maybe those profiles being rated by data, facts, and figures higher than your personal bias about a person who is probably very close to your own personality. And if you spin this example bigger, while we are hiring millions of people in many organizations all around the world, I believe we have a great opportunity to impact the social environment and maybe to balance out environmental injustice, for example, for underprivileged minorities, while we are doing a better decision on our hiring processes, as one example.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. And question 4 is about how you've best used your position to bring about a more equitable and inclusive environment in ways that deliver your business goals. But really what you've just described, connecting understanding and recognition of bias, allowing for that in decision making, in building the highest performing teams, is obviously contributing to delivering, highest performing business goals. So that was a great example to share. And I was wondering if there are any others that come to mind in the work that you've done about how in particular the work of HR leaders in creating improved equity and inclusion really does, when you're on one of your executive committees and discussing your bottom line, or you're looking at your commercial KPIs, how it really is driving business performance for you?
I mean, the good news here is, and let's stick to this example of inclusion and diverse teams and high-performing teams. Thankfully enough, we do not need to argue anymore, given lots of academia work, studies, facts and figures, again, that the more diverse your team setups are, the likelihood of being more successful is existing. We don't have to argue that anymore. And for me, this is really interesting that we had to argue that for so many quarters, for so many years, in order to start also this movement around inclusion much stronger. But I can tell you from my personal experience, maybe we don't need that kind of argumentation all the time. And here's a very practical example. When I'm employed as a head of HR for a global organization, and I look to my customer base all around the world, this is a reflection of our society. This is the reflection of the nations we have on this wonderful planet Earth all around the world. Now, what do I want to do from a business perspective? Ideally, I try to mirror that society in each and every location I am, because that gives me the highest probability to connect to my customer base in the very best way. If I don't do that, if I neglect that, I'm ruling out certain parts of a customer base. And clearly this will have an impact, because I will have no access whatsoever to certain markets, to certain groups within a market, or even to certain individuals. So in my point of view, you always have to find the correlation between business goals versus what we are doing within HR. And that brings me back to the discussion we had right at the beginning of this podcast, where I'm saying this is why you need to understand fact, figures, and data. And this is why you need to speak that business language, because that's the business language. And this is where leaders and managers are going to listen to us in HR. Unfortunately, this is not our natural DNA. And this is not, when you look at universities, HR people are being educated. But we need to go in this kind of direction. And that is going to make the change happening. Example. Look again into our peer organization called controlling and finance and accounting. These guys know all around the world how to close the books in just 2 different methods. That's it. That's the standard. They have set the standard how you're going to open and close books from an accounting perspective. Now, when you look into our community and when you try to define what is a talent, and you have 5 HR people in a room, you get at least 5 different definitions. And that drives business leaders crazy. They can't act on something like this. We need to help them also to make a better educated decision. And that's the only reason why you need to focus also on facts, figures, and be data savvy at the end of the day. So I have really used my role as a CHRO to make sure that my organization understands we are happily changing our habits from the past. We are happily trying to challenge the status quo. We are also eager to learn. We are eager to learn how we're going to use numbers, facts, and figures. And that, at the end, made us a much stronger HR organization, where we have even measured if our internal and external perception has been changed because we changed our mindset.
Yeah. Stefan, it's wonderful to hear you describe the comparison to your colleagues in finance. The first stage of my career was as an accountant. And the funny thing is, perhaps our paths would have crossed anyway if I'd have stayed in that profession, because one of the senior partners at the firm I was in once described me as somebody who likes to question the status quo. So maybe I would have been working on accountancy punks at the same time. And of course, I had to stay within the rules of the way you open and close the books and the accounting regulations. But I did question. I remember even at a young age, I was, thinking, how does this measurement of profit and loss capture the environmental costs that are happening through the products and services we're delivering? So I'm hoping deep down that there are accountants out there embracing the diverse and the HR punk concepts in challenging the status quo in finance as well. And question 5 that we end on, Stefan, is we like to get really specific so that the audience listening can think to themselves, I really love what Stefan said, and I really want to implement something next week in my work, in my company. So it's a hard question, but I'm going to ask you to choose just one thing. What one specific action you would like to see all HR leaders and all HR professionals to do? What would you like to see them do to make a positive change for the world?
I love your example, Cecilia, and that's exactly would be my one wish. Maybe a little bit provocative, but that's what it is. Get a fresh T-shirt on, and on this T-shirt you say #HRPunks. Go to the office and explain what you want to change and what you want to question as a status quo, and only that small little piece. New T-shirt on, HRPunks. With a different attitude, going to your office world, you're going to see that something is going to change. And if all in our profession will do that, I'm not just convinced that we will help our profession big time. I'm also totally convinced that for each individual practitioner in our lovely profession called human resources, there's something in it when you come back from the office, either hybrid from your office at home or from your office in your office building. You come back in the evening and just say, yes, I have done something which is going to be very helpful, not to rest, to continue to learn, to question what we have done in the past for one's sake, to change the world and maybe do something different, which will help us also to succeed in the future. And here is, if you want to hear one example, and I had a lovely conversation with an HR leadership team just last week operating on a global basis. And the question was, they got so much used now during the pandemic situation to first line interviews, and all interviews, as a matter of fact, to be done by online. Now, the first reaction of the majority of this group was going back to the office and implement to what they have seen and witnessed and experienced many years before. Every single interview is done again face to face. And I understand the rationale behind it in terms of body language and building empathy and building also an emotional bridge to candidates. But why are we trying to do that? I have no idea. We have now seen 12 months that it's working. We have seen 12 months that from time to time, maybe it's also good, for example, to do the first round interviews online and not physically, and maybe switching into physical meetings once you're further down the line when you're doing recruiting processes. But I would love to get also those people the T-shirt on, think twice, challenge what you have seen before the pandemic situation, learn and adapt and use maybe something different for the future. I can guarantee you it will be for your personal satisfaction, but I can also guarantee you the business will see the efficiency, the effectiveness, the improved parts of a process like that. And that small little step can help to improve our reputation as an organization, but also our reputation as a community, which is called human resources.
I love that, Stefan. Thank you so much. I am totally inspired to go and put on a new T-shirt as well, even though I am not an HR professional. I think it's a very accessible step and mindset shift that anyone can do at any time. It's practical and achievable for everybody. And I agree with you. Even talking about it, I feel that you can sense the doors that might open and the conversations that might begin just from that small step. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. It's been absolutely brilliant listening to you. I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure our listeners will too. Thank you again, Stefan.
Thank you very much. It was a great opportunity, and all the best for everybody who's listening to this wonderful podcast. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of How HR Leaders Change the World. Thank you for tuning in. If you have a moment to leave a review, a 5-star one please, that would be a huge help to achieving our goal to reach more of your peers, so we can all contribute to further and faster positive change. For your copy of the show notes, head to frombabieswithlove.org, where you can also join the How HR Leaders Change the World mailing list, and make sure you don't miss out on future episodes and bonus materials. And for harnessing the power of your role to create positive social change, I'm sending you a jumping up in the air virtual high five. See you next time on How HR Leaders Change the World.